Welcome into oneself, as in a dream, every element of nature, like flowers that breathe with the waxing and waning of the moon. Well, the lines up, yes, I swear.
Oh, here I go.
Anti-Oedipus, silver, Wissels up the tail, hey, pretty pings. I can't go like yellow. Even agent your bites the whistle. Works, Ralph.
Here I go, anti-Oedipus.
Yes, it's a William Brixit one these days. So it's still some. After.
Here I go, anti-Oedipus.
Oh, ho.
It functions everywhere, sometimes without stopping, sometimes discontinuously. It breathes, it heats, it eats, it shits, it fucks. One mistake ever said the it everywhere. It is machines, not at all metaphorically. Machines of machines with their couplings, their connections. An organ machine is connected with a source machine, one emits a flux which the other cuts. The breast is a machine that produces milk, and the mouth, a machine coupled to that one. The mouth of the anorexic hesitates between an eating machine, an anal machine, a talking machine, a breathing machine, deeper machine, asthma, attack. This is why we are all tinkerers, each with their own little machines. An organ machine for an energy machine. There are always flux and cuts. Judge Schreber 5 has divine rays in his ass. Solar anus. And rest assured it works. Judge Schreber feels something, produced of something, and theorized about it. Something is being deduced effects of machines, not metaphors. Stroll of the schizophrenic. It's a better model than the neurotic lying on the couch. A bit of fresh air, a relationship with the outside. Take the stroll of Lenz into the outdoors. It is different from moments when Lenz finds himself with his good pastor, who forces him to situate himself socially in relation to God, in relation to Father, in relation to Mother. On the contrary, he is in the mountains under the snow with other gods, or without God at all, without family, without father or mother, with nature. What does my Father want? Can he give me better? Impossible! Leave me alone. Everything is a machine. And three celestial machines, the stars are rainbows, alpine machines, each coupled with those of his body, noise machine. Uninterrupted, idling to mutter. It must feeling of endless bliss to be in contact with the profound, life profound to every form. To have a soul for the rocks, metals, water, and plants. To welcome into oneself, as in a dream, every element of nature, like flowers that breathe with the waxing and waning of the moon. Well, the lines up, yes, I swear, what the guy die will be dodging mad. In the replies. Krongas can be a chlorophyllin machine or a photosynthesis machine, or at least split his body as a part into such machines. Lenz. put himself before the distinction of man nature, before all the identifications that this distinction conditions. He could not experience nature as nature, but as a process of production. There is no more man nor nature, only process that produces the one within the other and couples the machines together. Producing machine, desiring machine everywhere, schizophrenic machines, all generic life. Me and not me, exterior and interior don't mean anything anymore. That was me, Anti-Oedipus. That was me, Anti-Oedipus. The desiring machines. Machines.
Anti-Oedipus, c'est vrai, c'est vrai. Grüße sagt euch, hallo, Penny Pings. Category, ja, look, e-mail agent bytes the whistle. Worksfrau.
Here I go, anti-Oedipus.
Yes, it's a William Brixit one these days. So it's still some after.
Here I go, anti-Oedipus.
Oh.
It functions everywhere, sometimes without stopping, sometimes discontinuously. It breathes, it heats, it eats, it shits, it fucks. One mistake ever said the it everywhere. It is machines, not at all metaphorically. Machines of machines with their couplings, their connections. An organ machine is connected with a source machine, one emits a flux which the other cuts. The breast is a machine that produces milk, and the mouth, a machine coupled to that one. The mouth of the anorexic hesitates between an eating machine, an anal machine, a talking machine, a breathing machine, deeper machine, asthma, attack. This is why we are all tinkerers, each with their own little machines. An organ machine for an energy machine. There are always flux and cuts. Judge Schreber 5 has divine rays in his ass. Solar anus. And rest assured it works. Judge Schreber feels something, produced of something, and theorized about it. Something is being deduced effects of machines, not metaphors. Of the schizophrenic. It's a better model than the neurotic lying on the couch. A bit of fresh air relationship with the outside. Take the stroll of Lenz into the outdoors. It is different from moments when Lenz finds himself with his good pastor, who forces him to situate himself socially in relation to God, in relation to Father, in relation to Mother. On the contrary, he is in the mountains under the snow with other gods or without God at all, without family, without father or mother, with nature. What does my father want? Can he give me...
Here we go. Anti-Oediping. Oh, here we go. I've been enjoying the shit out of that song. There's only a handful of us here at the Discord, but for the rest of you, hello everyone. How are you doing today on this lovely, lovely day? I'm a little blown out. Let me adjust the little over brightened. 1 second, adjusting my camera. Hope all of you are well. Give me just a moment while I get that. 'Cause it's, yeah, see, it's losing contrast. I don't want that. Pop. And then boop, 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 boop. See, that's much nicer. Yeah, good. Okay. All right, we'll go with that. Boom, boom, boom. I hope everyone's doing well. This has been a very long weekend. The problem is each one of these how-to philosophy videos that I've been putting out, my one this week was just sort of restating David Harvey's Abstract from the Concrete, but trying to simplify it because his hour-long talk plus his book is really great, but it's a more expansive thing than I think the goal of the smaller project is. The thing that was really wild is I started writing it last week thinking it would be easy because I've read this book like a dozen times. I fucking love it, but man, writing an easier version of it, that was turned out to be more difficult than I was ready for. So I was up till like 4:30, and then my schedule was all fucked up. What a time! But today, because ultimately you guys are here for one thing, you're here for Anti-Oedipus. We are making our way through. I should do the normal one. I've gotten too used to it. Hey there, welcome to the Deleuze and Guattari Quarantine Collective's ongoing reading of Anti-Oedipus. We have been working our way through the final section of the final chapter of the end of the book, so we can start over again and actually get to our fourth reading. I looked it up. This is only our third reading of Anti-Oedipus, but we're actually getting pretty close to our fourth, which will be pretty exciting given that that's probably within the next 4 or 5 weeks. We'll be doing our summaries like we always do, but then we'll be starting over, so that'll be fun. As we've made our way through this section, we've gotten into the final task of schizoanalysis. And the final task is to understand that there is a difference between preconscious interests and unconscious investments and how they function against each other or even counter-function, which, you know, depending on who you're talking to is going to be a real thing. We go about paragraph at a time, to be very frank at this point. Go about a paragraph at a time. Last week we got through 2 paragraphs, but it was 3.5 hours. We'll see. I do want to go back a little bit and make our way through the paragraph we left off last week and give it a specific sort of revisit. When we talk about preconscious versus unconscious, the wording here, the terms they're using are very particular and set up in some very specific ways. When we've been talking about the unconscious, we're talking about the drives that we're wholly unaware of, unconscious, unaware. These are the things that are somatic, bodily, forces beyond sort of our recognition. They're the repeated forces of will or desire that are able to and do directly invest in the apparatuses, arrangements, however you want to phrase it, on a whole bunch of different stuff. That thing that's happening with that is the unconscious investments. Desire invests directly in things. A child growing up directly invests in everything that he's able to. And the parents are, as they are ultimately conduits for everything that's happening socially, the child's effectively directly investing into the social world. There is no mediation that the parents are doing. The parents are a social world. Because of this, investments in those structures. You could say things like, for example, masculinity. We'll call it that. The way that people talk, the way that people deal with each other. These things desire directly invests within and finds itself sort of dealt with or satisfied in these ways. The preconscious interest, different beast. Preconscious interests are things that we, over time, sort of learn the narrative structure of. When we say, for example, I am a man, I have my class position, I have this position within society, this preconscious interest, not unconscious, but also not sort of fully, I'm wholly aware, but something that is preconscious. As such, that thing is set up by the space of representation to be angled in very particular directions, angled in very particular ways. So I can say that I am white, I am middle class, I am this, and I arrange myself socially. I understand my relations to other people through this. These two forms of how we come to learn who we are unconsciously, or how we're dealing with things unconsciously or preconsciously, these things come together to sort of give the flavor of how we deal with how the world works. When we see change or lack of it, how we want change or invest in change, or the lack of it. These things and how we sort of deal with the world puts us in a place socially. They have, as they've set up, and the previous paragraph goes over this, but the one we're going through today is dealing specifically with the odd way that groups come to function inside of this. And they divide people into basically two types of groups in this case. They want to talk about subjugated and subject. Subjugated groups are groups that, and we'll read through this to make sure, but subjugated groups are groups that are preconsciously interested in the way that the social system works, and that finds themselves at the preconscious level organized. I am white. I am working class. I am that. This is a subjugated group. The reason for this is because the social world that defines those things, we're defining ourselves within their very particular conditioning of not just those terms, but who we are. So as such, we are necessarily subjugated by the way groups are laid out inside of all of this. The subject group, and again, we're about to read through this. I'm kind of giving a preview after last week and sort of re-reviewing. But a subject group is one that doesn't necessarily have that a layout, the way that the social system has laid out. Here's what the group is. You're doing it according to this sort of conditioning. But a subject group is more or less wandering from group to group to group. It's a more osmosis-based thing. You happen to end up in a group that says that they are socialists. Are you a socialist? If you say you are, this is part of the subjugated group. But if you just happen to be part of a group, and it's a group, tends to be more subject group. An example I've used before that I like to use is actually how BLM, when it first really started, was subject group. People involved with it. It was a subject group, became a subjugated group. It's an interesting thing that happened through time. When the first sort of protests started happening, COVID was on, people weren't working, people weren't going anywhere. When the first protests started, for me in LA, and again, everyone may have a unique experience, but they just sort of happened. Now, I know there was people organizing it, but no one really went because they were part of Black Lives Matter. That wasn't like, oh, I'm part of that group. I am black. I am poor. I am this. It was the outrage at the thing, and people showed up for it, and they just kind of walked. It was in LA, it was very strange. Just kind of people went out and just started walking together because they all were upset about this thing. This is the subject group. At some point, it became more than that, where here are the shirts, here's the setup, here's how we're doing it, here's the organization, you are part of BLM. Well, with that becomes subjugated groups. The nature of investment in the group itself and the maintenance of that group being sort of core to it. So as we make our way through this paragraph, be sort of watching for all of that stuff, because that's sort of the big function that's happening here. The two types of groups that are basically the cornerstone of political theory for this entire work, and I think an incredibly important one for us to be talking about. Subjugated groups that operate according to the logic of domination, even if they're politically revolutionary, and subject groups that have a revolutionary investment at the libidinal level. They constantly are thriving on change. They subordinate social forms to desiring production rather than the reverse. Okay? Yes, go on. Maintenance is a big deal here. Maintenance of social bonds, maintenance of a specific way that social bonds work. Again, I like having friends. It's great. Many of you I'll talk to once in a while. We'll maybe form a friendship. But if you're married to the shape a relationship is, or a subject group is, and that shape and that style becomes the thing that you want to maintain, rather than basically just seeing what happens, then you move from one to the other. So we'll make our way through. One sec. Oh. Gotta close that window. All right. So with that, let's get reading. We gotta make sure it's all fitting. As always, if you support the stream, feel free. There's a link in, it's pinned to the chat. If you want to do a dono, don't give money to Google and YouTube. You can skip that. A revolutionary group at the pre-conscious level remains a subjugated group, even in seizing power, as long as this power itself refers to a form of force that continues to enslave and crush desiring production. The moment it is pre-consciously revolutionary, such a group already presents all the unconscious characteristics of a subjugated group. The subordination to a socius as a fixed support that attributes to itself the productive forces, extracting and absorbing the surplus value therefrom. The effusion of anti-production and death-carrying elements within the system, which feels and pretends to be all the more immortal. The phenomena of group superegoization, narcissism, and hierarchy. The mechanisms for the repression of desire. A subject group, on the contrary, is a group whose libidinal investments are themselves revolutionary. It causes desire to penetrate into the social field, subordinates the socius, or the form of power, to desiring production. Productive of desire, and a desire that produces, the subject group invents always mortal formations that exorcise the effusion in it of a death instinct. It opposes real coefficients of transversality to the symbolic determinations of subjugation, coefficients without a hierarchy or a group superego. What complicates everything, it is true, is that the same individuals can participate in both kinds of groups in diverse ways, Saint-Just or Lenin, for example. Or the same group can present both characteristics at the same time in diverse situations that are nevertheless coexistent. A revolutionary group can already have reassumed the form of a subjugated group, yet be determined, under certain conditions, to continue to play the role of a subject group. One is continually passing from one type of group to the other. Subject groups are continually deriving from subjugated groups through the rupture of the latter. They mobilize desire, and always cut its flux again further on, overcoming the limit, bringing the social machines back to the elementary forces of desire that form them. The footnote they have here is pretty great, and I'm just going to say it again, even though we go over it. What counts, what is effective in our opinion, is not such and such a group, but rather the dispersion or the diaspora produced by their splinterings. The breaking of the group, the cutting of the group, as they say. And this is where, again, the core ideas of these two types of group, but again, they even say, it's not two separate types of groups, right? This is not saying, oh, you're either this or that. No, you're either this or that, or both, neither. This is kind of how they're setting up. So when they say, for example, they open, revolutionary group at a preconscious level. Again, preconscious, not unconscious, preconscious. So they are revolutionary, but their preconscious interests are in some level of hierarchy, the capitalist system, the marketplace, whatever it is. Even in seizing power, as long as this power itself refers to a form of force that continues to enslave and crush desiring production. This kind of, again, formulates really the thrust of the book. Why do men desire their own subjugation? Because desire is the thing being crushed, and the crushing of desire kind of builds the conditioning for the crushing of desire. We are in Anti-Oedipus. It's the title of the stream. That's what we're reading. Sorry, just letting YouTube know. So, when we have this idea that political revolution at the preconscious level does not itself guarantee liberation from unconscious structures of domination, because underneath it, desire, the forces of desire, libidinal desire, again, not wants, don't fucking do that to me, not wants, but the thrusts of desire, the drives that are pushing people forward are towards the same systems, the same hierarchy, the same setup. The idea that there's I want change so that way I can be in charge kind of mentality. That setup is a big deal, because when we look back at successful revolutionary groups that have sort of been around, they tend to reproduce the same power structures that they overthrew, mostly because ultimately their desire underneath it is maintaining the same relationship to power and is being crushed by it in the same way that it was. So if productive desire in the groups is already placed in that way, there's no way for them to come out the other side as being totally revolutionary. James says wants are subjective as opposed to desire being pre-subjective. Wants are individual. Desire is before the individual can exist. Yes, that's an absolutely fine way to put it. So that's the subjugated group. And despite being sort of preconsciously revolutionary, as they say, they say in the next sentence, the moment it is preconsciously revolutionary, because again, they are ostensibly placing themselves in the position. I think of tankies as a great example of this, but Trumpers too. Like there's a reason that when we talk about reactionaries, those groups kind of always go together. They're talking about changing everything. They want to change everything. But the problem is that that group already presents all the unconscious characteristics of a subjugated group. They are, generally speaking from a place of being subordinated themselves to a socius, a social machine, large-scale social machine, as a fixed support that attributes to itself productive forces extracting and absorbing surplus value therefrom. This is the social body at large that exists. They're already there. They're already into it. They bring that with them. That is their unconscious libidinal investment in that larger format. That fixed support is a hardened social form that carries everything through. And it doesn't matter how revolutionary your preconscious is, if you are invested in maintaining that same structure, you're going to. That's just kind of it. It's not liberatory at that point. You may overthrow the old masters, but you just replace them with new ones, more or less. Again, with desiring production at the center here, not the human, the person. The person ends up liberated, sure, but it's not about the person being liberated. It's about desire being liberated. It's kind of a lot, but it is about that. And as they go on to say, the effusion of anti-production and death-carrying elements within the system, which feels and pretends to be all the more immortal. One of the weird parts of like the administrative state or bureaucracy or groups at all is that the systems within it feel like they've sort of always been there and that they always will be. And if we carry that with us, the idea of treasurer, the idea of marketplaces as we know them, the setups, the way that relationships sort of set up, all of these things need to be maintained. It's one of the reasons they spend a lot of time talking through the structure of things, because we tend to think of the structure of things very machinically or organically. We talk about it as here are all the pieces and here's the order stuff works. Or we talk about it as a cohesive whole. The federal government, cohesive whole. Or here's the legislative process. But we don't tend to talk about them together. And it's kind of important. It's why they tend to use the word arrangement of things. Because if we have an arrangement of stuff, the thing that we are doing by bringing it all together as a cohesive unit, that process, that hierarchy that is implicit in the process of us turning it into a cohesive singular unit, that thing can come and go, but if I believe in it, I will bring it with me. I will make sure that I contribute to it staying there through how my language works, through how I talk about it, through how I fund it, through how I take care of it. We do this sort of all the time through our anxieties. Capitalism works because of our anxieties. Big function there. I am anxious and I talk about my worries of this and that and the other. Other people talk to me about their worries of money and this and that and the other. And what we're doing without really realizing it is we are talking about and maintaining the structures that we are within. And that maintenance of that structure, the maintenance of the way things are arranged, this is a very, this is where we talk about death-carrying elements, the stability of things, the maintenance of things, the repetition of things that are purely habitual or sort of the structure of it. That whole thing is very unique. And that setup is kind of a big deal. And this is where we effuse anti-production. Anti-production is the maintenance of the system. Production is effectively new connections, producing. But anti-production, not like antimatter that cancels out, but instead is sort of a neutralizing productive capacity that, again, keeps the maintenance of the structure, the organization, the setup. I'm going to harp on this for a few minutes. Apologies. But if, for example, we were to talk about the way that the QC, if any of you want to join, discord.gg/DGQC, the QC and the maintenance of it is a very fascinating thing to keep an eye on. Any social group. But we don't really have, like, what is the Quarantine Collective? Well, it's a Discord group, YouTube channel, and sort of random disparate things that sort of come about. How do we maintain what it is? Well, we have rules, but we also have like a dispersed mod team who sort of do things ad hoc, and we have like minor votes. I tend to come in and like a wrecking ball, destroy a bunch of stuff and like try to reset it. But what is the QC? Because it's not a thing. It's an arrangement of people, words, code, items, PDFs, lots of PDFs, feel free to join, and setups. But what is it? Well, that thing needs to be maintained, and it's maintained through people, don't do that, do this. This is what we want. I don't know what the site, we had someone write, and I'm always fascinated when I just don't even know if I recognize the group anymore. It's like, oh, that's okay. It's interesting. Because that's anti-production. It's maintenance of the group. It's saying we need to go back to the Heideggerian spirit of the thing almost. And this is the thing to be very aware of. We all do. But what is a subject group versus subjugated? The subjugated group is about and has the effusion of anti-production and death-carrying elements within the system, which pretends to be immortal. Nothing's immortal, but feels like it is. The phenomenon of group superegoization, narcissism, hierarchy, the mechanisms for the repression of desire. This way that groups develop their own ego. You'll see it online, and online is like the best reactionary subjugated group machine that has ever existed. Go to a subreddit. They are Reddit r atheist is like this. Oh, Reddit r this is this. TikTok cringe, for example, was supposed to be originally a cringe thing for TikToks, but over time the community shifted it. What is it? Well, we're part of it, and now it's super egoized. It has an idea, it has an identity, it has a personality. The same is true of a DSA. If I were to say I went to my DSA group and I found everyone there very difficult to deal with and really bound into this weird hierarchical system, a lot of people would go, yeah, that's the DSA. But there's no such thing. It's an organization that is hierarchized, but again, fused with this maintenance, at this maintenance level. And so if we're invested in that, if we are building that, if we are, again, even pre-consciously revolutionary, but our unconscious, our libidinal desire is to be invested, is to effuse the model of things. Man, it doesn't really matter, sort of the rest of it, because we are ultimately repressing desire. So they go on to say, a subject group, on the contrary, is a group whose libidinal investments are themselves revolutionary. It causes desire to penetrate into the social field, subordinates the socius, the form of power, to desiring production. Instead of, and again, the wording here is specific, instead of subjugation, which is, again, sort of the original usage of the word subject, you are the subjects of the king, that kind of thing. They're playing more the subjectification rather than the subjugation at this point. That's why they have the, it sounds better in French. It's awkward in English. I've never been a big fan of it, but that's the idea. Subject groups, for them, their revolutionary character is the libidinal, right? That's how they're talking about it. So desire as such, because it's revolutionary, is able to penetrate into the social field. You see this actually a huge amount also. People, we live in, capitalism's filled with this, where people break the rules, break off of groups, no longer are involved, and by creating or working sort of against or whatever they're doing, they create splinter groups, or they even accidentally create a group. The QC is an example of this. It began as just sort of a bunch of dudes like getting together and talking, and reading a book, and then grew into something that actually is super egoized. And we try once in a while to blow it apart. Video games do this. Video game communities are like this. They sort of tend to come from, oh, I'm done with that game, let's go try this. Oh, okay. And it's freely connecting, freely moving, freely doing all this. But again, becomes super, but the subject group, that's the big deal. It's the libidinal investment is different. And again, it's not totalized. This is not something that the subject group is forever. The subjugated group is forever. You're either one or the other. That's not how they're playing with it. This is a ongoing, fuzzy, back and forth oscillation, not just of you and your subjectivity, but also how you interact with these groups and also how these groups interact with each other. I hear someone wanting to jump in. Go for it, Marcellus.
It's kind of like a lumpinization in Marxian sense, a lumpinization, right? Like Marx, of course, talk about class, but like for Deleuze, there's only one class, which is the bourgeois class, right?
Yes.
But like in Marx's sense, he has invented multiple like classes, right? Because it doesn't designate a specificality of the societies or specifying a symbolic like class or something like that, but it's a lumpen. That's why he called lumpen proletariat, right? Because it's a trans.
I'm hesitant to say it's like the lumpen proletariat, because the setup here is not really about one's own awareness or lack of it, which again, lumpen proletariat's very focused on one's awareness of their position or lack thereof. For the lumpen, the unaware, the dumbass masses, the hoi polloi of the world. This is much more focused on how a person or how a group is invested in its own maintenance, or are all of the people sort of just happen to be around and working together. The Arab Spring, is a great example of how you kind of have, and again, it's a razor's edge. This is not it's one or the other. It's like it slices and you kind of end up. There were absolutely examples, I think early on in the Arab Spring, where it was just, again, people just upset and wanting change and going out. at some point, people realized in hierarchies and people who were invested in those groups, they could take advantage of this. And they began the integration of that methodology, that setup, and these pushes. Those things, I think, are incredibly problematic. And that's where we start seeing the movement of the two. The investment in the group versus the just wanting change and not anywhere really to put it. This is the setup of the difference that they're sort of talking about. And that's the phrasing that they talk about, the exercise the effusion in it of a death instinct that they talked about before and we'll go into again. The absolute underlying thing here is the model or the awareness that death or the end of a thing is able to happen. Relationships of any sort are not going to last forever. As Iron and Wine has a great love song, which says, "One of us will die inside these arms," because that's the best case scenario. Everything ends. But we really like the idea. We get attached to the symbolic representational idea that is beyond that, of something that can outlive us or has always been there or whatever it is. And that thing we begin working towards. The great story of I started a company and then I'm going to make sure it lives forever. That kind of mentality. Or I have a political group and I want it to maintain power, or we've got it and I want to make sure we never lose power because I don't want us returning to the old ways, even though we totally end up doing that. Like, I mean, if you read again, Stalin's writings, this is where things went really south because of this type of thinking, that they needed to make sure that they weren't going to fall back into the old. They had to stay what they were now, or they had to and they become married to the hierarchy. The phrasing they use is the new group, the subject group, opposes real coefficients of transversality to the symbolic determinations of subjugation, coefficients without hierarchy or group superego. The coefficients of transversality, this is Guattari screaming through this, but I mean, sort of both of them together, to be frank. But this is about how within institutions there is authentic communication, not communication regulated by the hierarchy. Transversality, as he talks about it, was take a clinic he worked at, Laborde. And what he ended up doing there is he started noticing that there were areas that patients were being much better cared for than others. And one of the things he noticed, and I'm shortening a lot of it and simplifying, but he noticed that in this area, actually, the doctors and nurses were totally fucking all the time, like just banging each other. The others, not so much. What ended up, he started to realize, and anyone who's been part of a large corporation or any sort of large weird matrix structure knows that the way that people are required to talk to each other. Oh, here is the process. The nurse puts this here. The doctor reads this here. You leave this note here. That has formatting to it. It has hierarchy to it. It has rules around how that thing's done. Versus the surreptitious affairs that were happening where the nurse might say, "Oh, it's been a tough day, Mr. Johnson. Oh, God, he's just so awful. Really? What's going on with him?" And the doctors would hear stuff they would not normally hear. And that's the big fucking deal for this, because when we start talking about transversality, breaking down that hierarchy and having secondary sort of, as they say, coefficients of it, the ability for us to have authentic, directed conversations that's not preconditioned enables change flatly, and enables a lot better change, to be perfectly frank, than we're sort of used to overall, I would say. Because again, the symbolic determinations get tossed aside. I'm not a white man, this blah, blah, blah. Who gives a shit about that? That's not, individuals are what matter. The larger scale thing being visited on an individual statistically is crushing in every semblance of a way. This is, Tom McGowan has a video on how identity politics is necessarily reactionary, and he's not wrong. He's not wrong. He's completely right on that. And that thing is the thing for us to be aware of, that as we're doing this, as we place symbolism, identity, these things as front and center, it's conditioning all that comes after it, versus a much more, as Guattari talks about, authentically transversal or accidental conversation structure that can set up, enables new forms of organization that actually may not reproduce those same hierarchical structures, that may not have the group superego as we were aware of it or as it was set up. And that's
Quick question here.
Yeah, go for
it. If we mention transversality in this context, does it mean that there will be some sameness, but also it allows the stopping or non-reproduction of the previous power structure? Because I'm just surprised that they didn't mention anything about some sort of a sadomasochistic play that usually is in the background of such things, but does go.
Deleuze writes Coldness and Cruelty, which, hey, Ben, do you want to give a pitch for... Ben's here. Maybe Ben... Yeah, Ben might be tired. We have a reading on Deleuze's take on Seder and Masoch, and at some point we're going to have the same for Klosowski. The underlying thing is very different here because, again, for Deleuze, he doesn't actually see the sadist and the masochist as being compatible, and that underlying thing, I think, again, pushes in a new direction. The underlying structure is the big deal. So when we're talking about a group who has a structure or a transversal communication that goes not against the structure, because that would still be within the structure, but instead just breaks and allows new connections, and as such, new group and groupuscules and new setups can sort of form in that. That is what they're sort of aiming at, instead of anything being determined or conditioned.
But is there like a usual presence of some sort of a sadomasochistic play? I'm not
in what capacity? Sorry.
Just about the power structure, like some sort of hazing ritual, some sort of. It doesn't have to be that specific. For example, if you consider the corporates, right? Like some people have the group and the superego, and then if you go into a little bit of clinical literature, you can see more than enough that it's a very old truth where you can see a lot of these men, right? Like they are trying to aim towards high performance and in some sort of company or corporate life, and then they need a son and then need to abuse the son at the same time. So they achieve some sort of, I do think that there is some sort of transversality in there, but it's only a surface level. So I'm just wondering, does this almost provide a surface of that earth? Like, something that can be captured by a totality on the outside? I was just more specifically about some of the literature I view in the more family heavy cases, because I do think that like sadomasochism, it works as a surface, but whether it reproduce the power structure or not reproduce the power structure, I think it depends on something else. I wonder whether Deleuze and Guattari is actually making a slight kind of differentiation between that, but maybe I'm reading too much into it at this moment.
Ben. God damn it.
It's okay. I'll ask Ben myself a little bit later then.
So my first reaction would be, and again, I'm more speaking to this text rather than any others, the presumption that one is part of a group is the sort of subjugated group thing. When the symbolic, the idea of a thing, the aggregate, the structural norms are placed upon a person, when a person accepts them or even is interested in them, at that point, you're talking about someone being part of a group. When someone is not yet part of a group, or a group perhaps doesn't even exist in definition, and there are these transitory periods where one is forming, for example, as the groups form and as they have the hardening of the interrelated sort of hierarchies and communication and norms that begin becoming presented, they still are not yet a subjugated group, still subject, but at some point can switch to becoming, again, that super egoized hierarchical group. the movement away from that, or anything can also happen. It can also happen within the group, that the group itself is actually a subjugated group, but actually playing the role of a subject group depending, and vice versa. It's an incredibly complex relationship that goes beyond the idea of any transcendent groups, but instead the actually formed social norms of where I find myself and identify myself. So it's less I am going to see a sports team and more I am a Broncos fan. That difference is very significant, because it's about, underneath it, the drives being free to connect as they do, or the drives being crushed by the hierarchy of representation and symbolism. Does that make sense? Or is that not touching into what you asked at all?
I think you're touching into it. I was wondering whether they make a differentiation between a surface and something that's a little bit deeper, but maybe I'm reading it a little too much at this moment.
Well, as they say, they have the phrase, one is continually passing from one type of group to the other. There is no stability in not being, like, there is no, I'm not part of any group. Well, then you're not part of any group, and you're part of the group that says they're not part of any group. There's this continuous process that sort of is ever going. It's a question of desire being invested. How desire, it's literally a question of how desire is invested. Everything else is sort of secondary. If desire is invested in hierarchies that are around, we will find ways to replicate them. Humans will do this. If instead we are not invested in any of those, and in fact are invested in the overturning of those, it doesn't matter what hierarchy you present in front of me. There are rare cases, and they talk about this, rare cases of someone being exceptionally reactionary in their pre-conscious interests and their position. They're aware that they are wealthy and white, and they are married to the hierarchy. I use FDR as like my favorite example of this, because he's someone who was unabashed about his wealth and not really upset. And he and his wife were both, I'm not saying they were bad people. It has nothing to do with this, but their actual interest is in, and understood their interest. And so they were able to undo the systems that were there and invest in new. They, again, weren't Che Guevara executing people against a wall. That's not the idea, but they were, their interests, despite being deeply reactionary, which it was. I'm here to save America. I'm here to save the capitalist system. He was very much that. Yet his investments were in a very different place. So you can find really odd combinations of this, but again, it's in the hierarchy or in the lack of it that we find that investment.
Okay. I think they're doing some sort of a differentiation between the surface and the deeper content that is moving around. I think I understand what you're saying now, but I don't think they go into as deep as, what kind of sadomasochism is existing in hierarchy and whether that's necessary for a hierarchy. So I think I'm coming from a little bit too specific of a point. I think maybe it's even to the Foucault's perspective, but thank you. I think I understood what you said.
Can I?
Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm not sure if LG is coming from what I think he's coming from, but that's actually Zizek's critique of Deleuze and Guattari's in terms of capitalism. I don't know if that exactly what he's referring to, but that's exactly his terminology when he used critiquing capitalism, because he had this question in that book specifically, how do Deleuze and Guattari has this. So how he starts distinguishing fetish and I don't know if he even pronouncing it well, but fetishism and sexuality as something, and then he's asking how does Deleuze and Guattari jump from the deep.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's Zizek's critique, and I do think that. To me, as I understand Zizek, I do think that's a misunderstanding of Zizek, of Deleuze and Guattari's work, and it's coming from, exactly. It's coming from Lacanian perspective, which is, I don't think it's wrong, the perspective itself, but rather that if you're trying to critique Deleuze and Guattari, then you should understand the body and the surface in terms of Deleuze and Guattari's surface, because when you say deep. Yeah, go ahead, Brooke. I'm sorry. I don't.
It's like Ben phrased it early, and I know he's not able to talk because he wants to just make my life miserable and make me look like the one who's a jackass. But the big deal is ultimately that there is no such thing as sadomasochism. We have to kind of start there because we have to understand that masochism itself is basically about subject group formation via contracts, which is not hierarchical. Contracts are not hierarchical. They're deeply contingent and not institutional. Despite needing institutions, we can make that argument, but that's not really what he's talking about. That the masochism side of things is actually contractual and reciprocal, whereas sadism is necessarily dominant from above and doesn't have a contract. If I were to find, like, there's Raymond Smullyan even made this joke like 50 years ago that a sadist actually found a masochist and was miserable. It's the joke, Steve Martin and Bill Murray.
I think I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, I think I'm looking at this gaping.
Little Shop of Horrors. Have you seen Little Shop of Horrors?
No.
Okay, so you need to see Little Shop of Horrors. It's fucking awesome. And in it, Bill Murray is a masochist, and Steve Martin plays a dentist who's a sadist. And Bill Murray goes to see him, and he loves it. And Steve Martin becomes enraged because he can't make him suffer, because he's down for, like, they're incompatible, like, at a base level. And so sadism itself is necessarily hierarchical, is permanent, and is always affecting people. I want to say that aren't even involved. Like that's like core to it. Sadism is not a one-to-one agreement. It's like a violation of agreement. Whereas masochism is basically the destruction of the father hierarchy and everything else for contingent contracts. Ben, please.
No, I wouldn't say that. But
I could argue it.
Okay, I just want to chime in a little bit. Like, I do feel like I'm looking at the same, like, the gaping hole when, like, the academics talking about, fetishism, Marxism, and unconscious investment, but they never explain, okay, is this fetishism even coming from some sort of sexual place, or is it not from sexual place? If it's not have nothing to do with sexual place, then where does it come from and where does it go? You know, like, for the academics, a lot of times they just use the word fetishism without any kind of boundaries, right? So I'm looking at the same kind of gaping hole that really disperse these things where, okay, is it a surface of the body versus, like, deeper part of the body? Anyway, please explain more, Ben, if you need to.
I would like it.
Okay, so, like, a quick rundown of, like, I guess what we're talking about, coldness and cruelty a little bit here, and the incommensurability of sadism and masochism. So Deleuze breaks down Sade and Mazoch both into their literary projects to begin with, right? He looks at, like, what are they writing? What are they writing towards? What is the context of their writing? And we look at the similarities, right? They're both writing revolutionary literature in pre-revolutionary times, disguised as, like, pornological literature, right? So Sade is writing right before and during the French Revolution, and Mazoch is writing right before and during, like, the Pan-Slavic Revolution. So what they're really both attempting to do is they're working with Freud's idea of Thanatos, or the death drive, and they're approaching it in two different ways, both in their conceptualization of the law, right? So it comes down to, like, why do we have a law? Do we have a law because there is some superior position which issues it, thus giving, like, goodness and authority to the law and making it something worthy to follow? Or do we follow the law because it's good to follow the law because it's a necessary precondition for there to be a society, right? So Sade is working on this principle that there is a transcendent position above the law. So he's trying to think pure negation. And he's trying to demonstrate this, like, pure negation through what he calls secondary nature, which is basically, like, reality. So the sadist is attempting to do these destructive acts to show in reality this idea of pure negation. the attempt of the sadist is, like Brooks was saying, is like the destruction of their current hierarchical structure to transcend it and become free to dominate like this new hierarchical structure. They're trying to destroy in Oedipal terms, they're trying to destroy the position of the mother and elevate the daughter to a position of like incestuous lover and compatriot, to completely destroy the libidinal investment in the Oedipal structure, to free them to now like have this power themselves. Whereas Mazak is doing something completely different. He has this idea that the law is like a necessary precondition for there to be society, right? Like we follow the law because it's good to follow the law. So his writing is basically very similar to Kafka. Like there's no actual law. It's this very abstract thing. And he's attempting to take it to like its absurd fulfillment by creating these contracts that are entered into where the victim is the one initiating the contract that is giving up all their rights in the law to somebody else. So he's basically trying to do this disavowal and suspension of reality to think pure negation through fantasy, is how Deleuze describes it in Coldness and Cruelty.
Doesn't Deleuze, just to add, because it's also that with Massock, they're almost extending the law or contravening it, because a contract is basically creating law, but it's creating law that isn't the transcendent grand law
all the way into mythology, right? Like they are creating this ritual through the law that is going to like allow them to, in the symbolic realm, create these changes in their investments, right? So
definitely.
A lot of people will say that like in sadomasochism, like there's this idea that like it's all about the father or like the son or whatever. What the masochist is trying to do is create this parthenogenic ritual, this rebirth of himself completely free from the position of the father, a rebirth that is given only through the position of the mother.
And is temporally not like is temporal. It's he goes into Seder, how it's about, again, as you said, transcendent immortality. Like there's a God side, like it's very much in that direction. For Massock, it is a temporal. It's temporary. These things extend to a certain amount and then they go away. It's very. I've always seen these, and maybe Ben, you can correct me. I've always seen these as very compatible with subject and subjugated groups, at least in how they sort of form and come about.
I think
I think there's definitely parallels. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, LJ. Go ahead.
No, I think Brooks mentioned something that's really important about what kind of contract they're working with. You know, they work with contracts differently, and because they are combined together, it allows that manipulation of the pre-existing contract into a mythology realm. So I think that part really worked with, it's not really about passive, dominant, and whatever. It's about the way that they work with contract, or how explicit
or don't. And because again, the two sides for Deleuze, and it's one of the reasons, just to go back, Afton's really spot on when he says Zizek's entire critique of Deleuze is very much, I still don't believe he's actually read Deleuze, and I think a lot of it is from students who gave him thoughts and he ran with it. For Deleuze, Seder and Massock are not compatible. It's not even not compatible, they're incommunicable. They simply cannot even, like there's a gap that is impossible for them to cross. They do not come together. They're incompossible. Like it's a big deal. Contracts for Sade. Yeah. Thanks, Ben. Contracts for Sade is bad. Like just having a contract defeats the purpose. The whole point for him is that, he is transcendently God, able to do anything. And if there is a contract, then actually violating that contract is more important than like what's in it. Whereas Masok's like, hey, no, let's do this thing for like 20 minutes and we'll see what happens. And after that, we start like, it's a very different mental space.
Especially if you read like Juliet or 120 Days of Sodom or Philosophy in the Bedroom, you see how important it is for Sade that there is no consent or enjoyment in the part of the victim.
Yeah, it's a very different beast. It's why, again, so for Deleuze, when we're talking about it,
I think I got it now. Yeah, actually, it's like they're working with two different universal logic that is from different universe. Yeah, it's actually quite interesting to see that from a Seminar 19 perspective of Lacan's side. But I don't know if that's even possible to do. But after
you would love Coldness and Cruelty, LJ. It's the most Lacanian book Deleuze ever wrote.
That's not untrue. Like it really references a lot, and it really references a lot actually.
I try to make more time because
Well, come on, you don't have enough time for all the things we talk about. Amateur.
Sorry. In terms of the Thanatos and Eros, right? When in different repetition, right? Deleuze said that, like, quoted Freud, that there is no negation in the unconscious on the unconscious level. You know, Deleuze said that, like, in the different repetition, is that we have to understand it literally, that there is no negation in the unconscious. There's no the element of negative, which mean in the weird way that Eros and Thanatos, the thing that Thanatos, the destruction, the energy or the drive or the libidinal drive of Eros and Thanatos are representing the same thing for Deleuze in different repetition. That's where I understand from it, right? It represents the Eros and Thanatos represent the same kind of, the same kind of like it's kind of destroying and creating at the same time, right? It's not a pure negation, right? So correct me if I'm wrong. If that
it plays differently. So to really oversimplify, and I don't think I could do this without like a lot of details. So I'll be doing my best to sort of like make my way through this. The Thanatos for Freud ultimately is this complete and total death, lack, emptiness, anything that is not within experience as a thing. So we're like an extreme negation. It's an extreme negation as a thing. But for him, it's a transcendent principle. It's important that this be there. On the other side, he's got Eros, and this is this energetic side of things that's like creative and all of that. But again, it's not that Eros is empowered for Freud. It's Eros is subjugated by Thanatos and the continuous push, because it's, the libidinal is not transcendent. It's very much imminent. That setup, Deleuze kind of shits all over really, really fast, because for him, death being part of how desiring machines function, like they stop, like that thing, the desiring machine stops. That's how it works. The desiring machine dies. And they always die. There's no such thing as a consistently running desiring machine forever. They're going to be cut, broken, stopping, whatever it is. And so because of that, death is part of the machine. The machine ends in the same way that at the end of the night, you turn your computer off, or maybe you don't, I don't know. But like even your transistor turns on and off, and that those things exist. This is not some abstract transcendent principle. Death is imminent to the way that the functioning of all this works. And so as such, the experience of death, which is basically everywhere, it's like the most common shit that is around, because it's in life. It is in life. Your cells die. I will die. You will die. I hate to break it to everyone. We're all going to die. Spoiler alert. I know it's terrible. But that thing that exists is not abstract. That's not transcendent. That is just the way that it works. And with this, we do this weird thing where we move from the imminent experience of death, which is not transcendent. It is there's a transcendental death, like it's part of experience, part of the thing, but it's actually something that we then push towards the model, because a machine dies and it will die over and over and over. There's a repetition towards Thanatos that we start to see patterns. We start to recognize, well, we want to keep this around. I want to have a home. Well, what does that mean? My home. This is my home. That's the door I go into. That's the, if you're Asmongold, that's the fucking rat that I use as my dead rat alarm clock. And that's my wall of gum blood and snot. And that's mine. This is mine. This thing is being invested in constantly. This structure is being invested in constantly. So for Deleuze, death is almost a productive force because it requires new connections. But the model that is built out of it, the model that becomes out of it, we are over-invested in. And that thing, because it is, again, this is a different setup. What's the phrase? I'm looking for the phrase. 1 second. Because we just went over this. It was like 10 pages ago. The experience of death is the most common of occurrences in the unconscious, precisely because it occurs in life for life. In every passage.
Avnan super chatted $6.63. I think THs is the only way to support the stream. Smile.
Thank you, Avnan.
What's happened?
I had a super chat. Sorry. You have to deal with it once in a while. I had a super chat, which yells and talks. Thank you, Afnan, by the way. But just to restate, it occurs in life for life, in every passage, every becoming, in every intensity as passage or becoming. This is not the transcendent model of death. This is a completely different way of dealing with it. And so as such, when we're talking about sort of the way death pulls into things or how we view stuff, it's a very different beast than Freud. It's imminent to us, but we build the machine. And as we build the machine, there are parts missing, but we build around it. It's almost a negative image. But that negative image ends up helping us build the model, which as we build the model, we invest directly into the model, which is nothing. The model is nothing. The model is death, effectively. But it's that setup differently. It's an affirming way to have Thanatos rather than a negative way.
Rather than associating like Freud did Thanatos with destruction, right? It's associated with creation, with some kind of creation for the remodel of or the model itself, which is in relation to the copy or the thing, like in on the passive synthesis, on the dark precursor in some sense, right? It's kind of like beyond the principle itself, not like beyond the pleasure principle, but beyond the principle, which is kind of the Thanatos, which is the power of destruction. It's not a power of destruction, it's power also of creation also, right? It's power of remodeling.
Well, this is the reason Deleuze and Guattari both hate psychoanalysis, or psychiatry as it was and kind of how it is for them, the words they use is that psychoanalysis should be, quote, a song of life or be worth nothing at all.
Yeah.
Which is, basically.
A very good quote, by the way. It is. And I read Deleuze, like I'm about to finish like the last, I have 10 pages and I will finish different repetition. It's fantastic work.
It's so good.
It's very fantastic. Like, and the logic of sense, by the way, Brooks, I will remind you that like there's videos on YouTube you didn't publish.
I need to finish them. I know. Like there's
him. Tasks.
Well, I almost want to go back through and actually do a full reading of Logic of Sense because in the time since that reading,
we had do that actually. We should do that.
We should, because Logic of Sense was the first book we did after we started doing AO. And so you're talking about, it's been like 3.5 years since we touched it. And in that time, not only has there been even better secondary literature, Mehdi Parsa, Mehdi Parsa, Parsa, wrote a stunning fucking read of Logic of Sense that is fucking amazing. I just have to mention it. But there's been so much work done. And then on top of it, being able to go through, we've done readings on almost everything be able to go back to it and go, okay, here's the deal. And it's a completely different beast when you have, honestly, Klosowski and Bergson behind you. And at the level I now do, it's probably worth doing. Yeah, we need to do a fucking Logic of Sense reading. God damn it.
Not God damn it, bro. Hallelujah.
Well, I mean, how many hours in a day do I have? But we'll find out. The last line, and I want to move to the next paragraph. The last line in this paragraph that we're reading here, and it's about subject groups. Subject groups are continually deriving from subjugated groups through a rupture of the latter. They mobilize desire, always cut its flux again further on, overcoming the limit, bringing the social machines back to the elementary forces of desire that form them. They make desire pass and always cut it again further on. Always cut it again further on. There is a weird thing about the flux of desire that's happening here that is about it being both facilitated and interruptive of the flux of desire. And as subject groups emerge from these ruptures within subjugated groups, because that's the thing, these breaks allow desire to have a different setup, have a different organization, to connect differently. It isn't purely liberatory. They don't just simply, it's liberatory, there you go. No. These subject groups actively still also work with the flux of desire itself. They cut, they reconnect, they play with it to overcome the limits of the subjugated group. You see this quite often Trumpism is a fucking great example, to be frank. It comes out of conservatism, which ended up being like a hard right push by Rush Limbaugh and others through the 80s to just try to consolidate power, but ended up in the Tea Party movement, pushed by the wealthy, that ended up backfiring as a populist movement sort of swelled underneath, and the hardening of the Democrat Party sort of in opposition drove lots of little splinter groups, again, funded by power and rebrought in, because a subject group brought out can be just co-opted just as easily. It doesn't matter. But the whole idea of understanding the social formations, how these things crystallize and how they shift and how they break and how new things crystallize around those pieces is phenomenal. I think it's a very, very strong way to sort of talk about all these things.
Or Pat Buchanan. You remember Pat Buchanan?
I do remember Pat.
Yeah. Patty Pat.
Well, and
he's responsible. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. Sorry for interruption.
Go.
No. Like a lot of right wingers like discussing his books and like the death of the West and these kind of things, and like it's kind of like similar to what you said about the subjugated group, right? It's a perfect example. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
Well, and you see this Bill Clinton was elected because of a splinter in the right wing, as Ross Perot basically put a bunch of money into his own party and got, these things in the process of it's really fascinating. I find it fascinating, but it happens not just at the political level. This is every level. Family, friends, social groups, work groups, companies, this is not just purely talking about political groups. This is any group. If it is in line and invested in the social structures at large, subjugated. If it is not, subject. And we oscillate between them, and even the groups themselves oscillate. And it's a really fascinating sort of play here.
But Brooks, how can you anticipate that like our investment in the subjugated group, right, will not hurt us in the long run?
You will. Of course it will. That's the point. You can't ever tell.
So we don't have a choice.
No, there's no decisions made here. Why would you think there's decisions made?
Okay.
Like, again, right now you're in the QC, talking as part of the QC, but also disagreeing with me, clearly not part of the QC. As we're talking, you're oscillating between subject and subjugated.
No.
Like, literally you are. I am too. Like, the point is not that there is a consistent subjectivity. That is the model. That is the sort of tending towards the hierarchy, the death drive, that setup.
So it's okay to be open to our vulnerability, right?
Ideally be open to it, yes.
Yeah. I always, throughout my life, that's personal, by the way, but I always lived in a society where when you open your vulnerability, you kind of you're a weak person, right? You're kind of like you're open, especially with, I'm not talking about even to the public, but also to the people, even in your own family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, and again, I have a handful of friends that I've kept for an exceptionally long time, and our friendship has metamorphosized and died and been reborn in really strange ways. I think I'm hoping a lot of people can understand that. If you can't, it's a fascinating thing maybe to hear about then. But the desire to maintain the friendship versus to keep someone in your life, these are two different drives. One keeps the friendship, the structure, the relationship in a form, in a setup, versus just being, no, I'm open wherever you are. I'm here. That kind of acceptance of someone and being vulnerable in that way, difficult, nightmarish, really hard for people filled with anxiety. I get it. But at the same time, hey, there's actually some interesting shit there when it comes to that. The next paragraph. I'm going to zoom this. I think I can get it all on one page. Yes, we're going to read through the whole thing because this is, just to say, we end with subject groups mobilizing desire, bringing the social machines back to elementary forces of desire that form them. But inversely, we're talking about subject groups. They are also continually closing up again, remodeling themselves in the image of subjugated groups, re-establishing interior limits, reforming a great break that the flux will not pass through or overcome, subordinate the desire machines to the repressive aggregate that they constitute on a large scale. There is a speed of subjugation that is opposed to the coefficients of transversality, and what revolution is not tempted to turn against its subject groups, stigmatized as anarchistic or irresponsible, and to liquidate them? How do we combat the deadly inclination that makes a group pass from its revolutionary libidinal investments to revolutionary investments that are simply preconscious investments or investments of interest, then to preconscious investments that are simply reformist? And where do we even situate such and such a group? Did it ever have revolutionary unconscious investments? The surrealist group, for example, with its fantastic subjugation, its narcissism, its superego. It can happen that one lone man functions as a flux schiz, as a subject group, through a break with the subjugated group from which he excludes himself or is excluded. Artaud, the schizo. And where do we situate the psychoanalytic group within this complexity of social investments? Every time we wonder when it started going bad, it is always necessary to trace further back in time. Freud as the great superego, an Oedipalizing grandfather, establishing Oedipus as an interior limit, with all kinds of little narcisses around. Reich the marginal, plotting a tangent of deterritorialization, causing the flux of desire to circulate, smashing the limit, breaching the wall. But it is not just a matter of literature or even psychoanalysis. It is a matter of politics, though not, as we shall see, of a program. Pardon me, I need to get some water. It's a lot said in here, mostly setting up. This is mostly, by the way, just setting up for what's coming, just so you know. So I'm going to do my best to kind of explain things, but most of these things, because they have a question mark, means it's a question they're asking, and I'm not going to answer it. Just so you know. Just so you know. Just to be very upfront. All right. Inversely, they are also continually closing up again. Okay. Subject groups as a thing close back up again. They do the same shit. They remodel themselves in the image of subjugated groups. Let's think. Fuck. I mean, pick a political movement. It's so much easier. But pick. Video games are fun to talk about. I'm a Dota guy. I'm going to use Dota here. Sorry, just deal with it. Dota has a meta, right? And it's really interesting to watch how the metas change and apply. TI2, the Na'vi were playing against another team in the championship. And there was a moment where Dindy and another player decided to use a move that was very risky and difficult, but also almost a bug in how characters interacted. And they used it to dominate and destroy the other team. This thing you saw, people didn't use this move the entire tournament because it was seen as not doing that. Someone broke that mold, Dindy and his guy. They broke that mold. They did it. The rage around this and how it was set up and how people spoke of it is a really interesting case study in exactly what they're talking about. These groups opening up, closing again, remodeling themselves in the image of the subjugated group, reestablishing interior limits. Interior limits are external expression, internalized blockages, blocking internally, self-regulating. The group with their own rules around, look, if you're part of the group, we don't do this, we don't do that, we don't do these things. This is, don't do these things. The great break, the schism between the flux and the anti-productive forces, the way that movement becomes arrested, the great breaks that the flux will not pass through, that they will not overcome. They use a lot of spatiality here, but it's this weird thing. The group closes back up, and then these are the rules, and you're not going to go outside of them. That's it. And then off they go. And then again, another group will splinter up and harden and do the same fucking thing all over again. All over again. All over again. And I'm a Warlock and Techies main. Explain it again with Overwatch. No. Actually, Overwatch is itself a really interesting version of this. If you don't know the story of how Overwatch came about, the team at Blizzard were building an MMO for years. And all the characters we see were actually part of this. And then the MMO, they just didn't have the money. This large thing that everyone had been working towards, this one singular vision, singular hierarchy of things building towards, just destroyed. And a handful of the guys were like, let me try to build something out of this. Just don't fire everyone. We're going to try to build something out of it. And they had no idea what they were going to do. And they went back to the drawing board with all the pieces and they reconfigured. And they built Overwatch, which hardened into a really brutal, very specific thing with no modding, no changes or anything. The spirit of Overwatch, and it was birthed in the forge of the Phoenix. No other way to describe it. The internal stories are incredible. That then became hardened and brutalized until they ended up making Overwatch 2, which was such a hilarious copy of the first. They ruined themselves. There you go. It's actually a fantastic version of that. This is the thing, the reestablishing of interior limits. The old game dies. Overwatch team, which wasn't Overwatch, it was just some fucking guessing team, was like, what do we do? I don't know. Let's figure some shit out. And they tried everything. And some of the best developers maybe at Blizzard, who aren't there really anymore mostly, but some amazing people. Is proud to call Scott Lawler a friend, and he was an audio director. He's a phenomenal audio guy, super nice too. But the team on it, super amazing, just working together, no clue what they were going to build until it became defined. Then it hardened, then it solidified, then it grew, then it collapsed. Hey, that thing, the great reforming a great break, the flux will not pass through or overcome. Rehardening, subordinating desiring machines, the repressive aggregate that they constitute on a large scale. Remember, nothing isn't desiring machines. Everything is desiring machines. Desiring machines are everything. They're molecular. They're micrological. Where we see an event or a thing, the social space, social machines, are desiring machines under contingent circumstances, under determinate circumstances, specified. This thing, it's desire machines specified. So, desire machines have been subordinated again to the repressive aggregate that they constitute. They themselves constitute the aggregate, the totality, the everything. They constitute all of it. But they're repressed by that, not by the weight of it. You could talk about it in that way. I've spoken a little bit like that. But when desire machines form and they develop and we see these patterns in them, the social order we start seeing, then the image of the desire machines become deeply repressive because they're the thing we need to go for, but we can't because it's a fucking image. You can't go for that. There's nothing. Yeah, but that image is desire machines, hilariously. So there's this molar formation of the molecular element, molecular desires, the large scale contrasting the micrological, and talking about these things at the same time. They say the speed of subjugation opposed to the coefficients of transversality. As much as I was talking about the thing before, the doctors and nurses, which is like my favorite story of these, this happens at every company. Softball teams at companies. I've worked at a handful of game devs that had softball teams that played other softball teams, and also had softball teams internal to the company. It ended up being filled with people across disciplines. The conversations that happened there were amazing and kind of were able to go around expected meetings, purpose. Oh, why are you wanting to meet with these guys? No reason. Great reason. And then you meet, you talk, and weird conversations end up spawning new things that changes the face of stuff. But after a while, because there is subjugation happening, now you have the softball team. And now you get together with those guys, not anyone else. Now you talk about the things that you've always talked about. Now you've got this thing opposed to the coefficient of transversality. They're at loggerheads. They're constantly playing against each other. And again, Guattari's work is super about this. Transversality, non-hierarchical. It isn't just free to do whatever. It's in battle with the coefficient of the opposite, the speed of subjugation. Because at the same time that you're having this freeing, holy shit, we can talk about stuff, I'm learning stuff, the moment you kind of recognize it, like if the doctors are like, hey, at this hospital, we realize the doctors and nurses do better when they're all having affairs. So on Mondays, Steve is going to fuck Stacy. Like the moment you do this and it becomes part of the hierarchy, you've done the thing that ruined the thing. But it's almost like we can't help it because of the way these things are structured. I wonder if they write about that. Oh yeah, they do. And that's the
like Playboy, right? Like in the 60s.
It's actually not far from that. Playboy, really fantastic example, actually. Probably one of the most, and I mean this when I say it, probably one of the most groundbreaking magazines for a couple reasons. Black writers and photographers and people were actually brought in ways that no one else would give them the ability to do. It changed how people dealt with magazines. And Hefner, whether or not it was because he was brilliant or just happened to go in that direction, the setup for Playboy early on was because we have naked girls, we can do kind of anything else. And so he wanted to make sure that like it maintained a highbrow edge. It's kind of fascinating. But over time, what that meant or what it was hardened, became insular, became closed off, and then became the sort of joke of everything that it ended up becoming. This is not drastically dissimilar to a lot of things. National Lampoon, for you kids, National Lampoon, for people my age, made a series of movies. That's mostly what people know. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, European Vacation, but then also Van Wilder and a whole bunch of other horrifying, weird, like sex pest fucking 2000s, 2010s movies. But that's not what it actually was the thing that predated and broke the ground careers of, Belushi, Chevy Chase, like extraordinary numbers of comedians who were doing National Lampoon Radio Hour before Saturday Night Live was a thing. What it became, what it was, how it formed and shifted over time, that fucks everything up. Because it became a thing. And when it became a thing, it became defined, became hierarchized, became something we need to maintain. And now energy is being put towards that, desire being put towards that. But desire is not free. Now it's crushing desire. Desire doesn't want to stick. Desire has no idea what the fuck these groups are or what these things are. It wants to just do stuff. And you see that kind of quite a bit. Larry David with Seinfeld. He had no idea what he was doing, pitched the dumbest idea that he could have, which is he wanted to make a show about where comedians get their ideas from, which is everyday life. That's how he originally pitched it. He did 2 seasons of this. He kind of left afterwards. He wasn't super involved in the later seasons of Seinfeld, which was incredibly successful. But also, it was the thing, and it became a thing, and it kind of went up its own ass at one point. This is how this works. This is the process. They're outlining it because of how desire becomes something representational that then crushes itself, and then again, over and over and over. And what revolution, and they're very much talking at this point about the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, but pick one, because they're all kind of like this. What revolution is not tempted to turn against its subject groups, stigmatized as anarchistic or irresponsible, and liquidate them? Is extremely common amongst revolutionary groups who do get power. I'm unaware of any that don't do this. The weirdos on the fringe who weren't really part of it, but happened to be part of it. Who actually tend to be the people who are like at the cutting edge of, inspiring and really, helping drive things in a direction that really connects with people and do that. Yeah, we don't want them around. They're not going to be able to keep stability in place. Trotsky to Lenin to Stalin, I think, would be kind of the gradient we're talking about here. That's what I would say. That's how I would put it. And they go on, how do we combat the deadly inclination that makes a group pass from its revolutionary libidinal investments to revolutionary investments that are simply preconscious investments or investments of interest? The pull towards bureaucracy is kind of what they're referencing here. How do we, I don't want to say avoid that, because again, that's countering that. It's even combating it is talking about being directly at it. They're asking, how do we engage unconscious desire in a way that's there that can lead to interests that can do that? How do we do those things? I'm not going to answer that today. I'm explaining what they're writing in this paragraph, just so you know. Not answering right now. We're going to get to the paragraph. Then to preconscious investments that are simply reformist. The progression from revolutionary libidinal, as they say in the previous, to revolutionary preconscious to reformist is entropy of the political sort. The complete capture within the existing system of reformism, which I'm guilty of as anyone. I voted for Kamala. I voted for Obama. I voted for Hillary. I voted for Biden twice, sort of. I don't know, whatever the fuck that Kamala vote was. I'm as guilty as anyone, reformism. I'm captured by the system. I'm completely unaware of how I can do things that will actually positively change things and not put people at excessive risk. And that's how I look at the world. And I think it's a fair way to look at the world. And I haven't had a lot of arguments against it. But what does revolution do to us? How do we consider these things? How do we deal with that? And how do we manage that? And they say, where do we even situate such and such a group? Did it ever have revolutionary unconscious investments? The Surrealist group, which is if you go back from May 68, France had a lot of really interesting movements. And the Surrealists, the Situationists would be another one. They have a lot of really interesting subject groups. And the Surrealists had fantastic subjugation with narcissism and superego. They really backed one horse and in one direction. And as much as it may sound, surrealists, they're beyond, no, they were doing a thing. And you were doing that thing if you were part of the group. And it was fantastic. It was a fantastic subjugation, but it's narcissism and superego were there. The group dynamics that keep pushing them towards it. And they say it can happen that one lone man functions as flux schiz, as subject group through a break with the subjugated group from which he excludes himself. It can just be a dude. And they use the example of Artaud, who's a poet who came from a lot of groups. I believe the Surrealists is one of them, but he kind of splintered off, and he was schizophrenic. He did everything. He did whatever he wanted. And so that's great. He actually created a subject group. He broke with it because he excluded himself as a thing. Yeah, it's a good example. But then also his life story kind of goes another direction, you could say, as well. Where do we situate the psychoanalytic group within this? And that's kind of their joke as they go through this. It's this whole thing, all of this. What do we do and how do we do it? And they use the examples as they sort of, run through, but they end. This just to say the last bit, because we're going to do the next paragraph next. And I want to, before we do that, I want to be able to say this and then get everyone's questions, because all the questions they're going to be answering. They don't leave a lot of these open, but it's a lot at once. And I want to make sure everyone understands what they're asking. But the last bit, it is not just a matter of literature or even psychoanalysis. It's a matter of politics, though not a program. Very specific language when they mean program. Do X, then Y, then Z. A program, and even in coded language, when we talk about a program, it is if X, do Y. Go to line 10, whatever the fuck. But it's do this, do this, do this, do this. Here's the order of things that need to happen. No. They don't want that. It's a matter of politics, but not a program. They're going to be talking, just as a hint, about more the processual kind of things, rather than this, then this, then this order of things, if that makes sense. The whole point here is dealing with the paradox of these revolutionary organizations and how subject groups form from them that break free of these other groups that do have revolutionary capacity, but ultimately reconstitute the very same problem that they sort of dove back into. And they give a handful of examples as they make their way through, but this is the thing they're wrestling with. Any questions before I dive to the next paragraph?
So what's the purpose? What's the purpose of psychoanalysis? Like, on all of this?
That's literally a question they ask that they'll be answering.
Okay.
This is going to be the thing that they want to push towards, is exactly that question. So what is the purpose of this? Why is this here? How do we use these pieces, and how do we make our way through these things? And that's for me, the thrust of everything they're asking about. Yeah. It's a tough one, because it's a lot of questions that are leading into what is a very long paragraph. It's a lot. But literally, just so you know, the next paragraph opens with the task of schizoanalysis, because what they're wanting to do is evolve psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is built in a very particular coded way where you basically are trying to adjust a person to the social order, that you're working within their neuroses to heal them and make them healthy in a properly neurotic way. And they want to toss out all that, because that process, the way that ends up coding the world for us, basically creates this problem that then it's trying again to solve. If that makes sense. So there's going to be a lot of stuff in this next one, but they kind of answer a huge amount of it. Any questions? Now's the time.
There was something that I wanted to ask you about, but then it was few paragraphs ago, and I did, because there was a conversation, so I didn't.
Please, go for it.
Yeah, it was the part where you talked about the revolution, and like, because you mentioned the Arab Springs, you mentioned
Yes.
whatever revolutions that didn't actually change the system in any way. It just like changed the people. You said to change the people or person, I think. So that's where, because that's where when I like it linked with Arendt's critique of freedom, or the idea of because until the 20th century, freedom used to be seen as something abstract, as something like if you're reading Schelling, for example, and his problem with Spinoza is regarding that there isn't really a space for human freedom to be moving or something. But then Arendt's freedom is more of an action, and that's it's a something that continues, that you carry on, that you keep doing. So freedom isn't actually something in us or something that is abstract. It's rather a process, a continuous process. But that's where I think Arendt understands it a little bit wrong, because from Arendt's perspective, if we would talk about, for example, the revolution in Iran, or for example, the Arab Springs or whatever, the moment that the public or the people left the streets and went back to their homes or did the elections, then that's when they lost freedom. That's when they lost the what was called during the French Revolution by Robespierre. He said after the French Revolution, after Rousseau wrote the social contract, that we lost the treasure of the revolution, which is freedom, because we didn't have time actually to build freedom. We rather went directly and built a social contract that is more of an oppression in some sense, because it is homogeneous. It looks to the people in terms of they are all equal when they aren't actually equal in some sense. You get the idea there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when I think I don't know how to pronounce his name. The guy who has a white picture of, I think, Rocket.
Marsalis.
Marsalis. Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, Marsalis. Sorry. So exactly, Marsalis, you talked about something that, and I did put a photo from regarding Althusser and subjugation, because when you talked about subjugated group, I put it in the chat a while ago, not right now, but like since nature, subjugation is no longer merely something external, like authority that comes. Like authority over the subjects of human beings, but it's rather it has also become in some sense the process through which these individuals become subjects. So subject itself is happening through a subjugation. Am I still making sense in this term? Okay, good. So when you think of it that way, then the subject is initially formed or grounded through submission to an authority, whatever authority it is. And like if we're thinking of it, for example, in Heideggerian sense, then we would think of heritage in some sense. If we're thinking of it in terms of Deleuzian way of thinking, then maybe it's the relations that exist before us. Because like to Deleuze, for example, when he says that my pain exists before me, I think that the way I will translate it, that it exists before his coming, what you called pre-conscious. Like this pre-conscious is more of an heritage that we take. And but this relation isn't just a one-way relation, it's a dual process. So
it's a simultaneous process. So the historical and social world for Deleuze and Guattari is something that is born out of desiring production. Desiring production exists in time, but it's the response to it. The way I like to talk about it is the way that if I burn my hand, that didn't happen a moment ago. There is a weird set of things where it's all of the connective properties of touch, of sensation, of smell, of sight, of hearing the noise, feeling the temperature, of feeling the tension in my body, all those things, all of those like responses, they don't exist within a moment. They kind of overlap each other and they kind of continue, and some continue on for a while. That in time sort of situation that these things sort of have as you sort of make your way through them, that is this not wildly different as, you know, as I'm growing up and I hear my family's German and that we're religious or conservative or whatever. And it's like, you hear these things over and over, and in time, your sensational response to them becomes more patterned, more set, more aware of that sort of continuity. So that preconscious interest is the historical, political, and social as I understand my position in it. But desire, even with all that, is still just doing whatever the fuck it does. Those continuous trenches of desire that my interests are in, I'm invested in those things, and desire is repeating those things and sort of invested in them. That thing is also desire. So it's this weird thing of desire crushing desire, but it's doing it through a mechanism of representation almost. Does that make sense as I'm saying it?
Yeah, it does make sense. But like, so what I meant by dual process, it means that it's the primary authority, if we would say, if I would name it authority, but the primary relations that exist prior to my existence, that I am more like engaged with in a process of becoming. But it's also a reverse formation as well. I do make. When I say I don't mean I as an individual. I do mean like you get it, like just a word that we say. Yeah, like there is this reverse formation within it. So back to Heidegger, for example. Heidegger, when the question of Heidegger of when we say what does it mean to have a heritage, is a good distinction of heritage in a good way from Heidegger's sense, because it's not merely something that is put in us, but to exist to him is to inherit. It means that you're coming to something that pre-exists you in some sense. But in the same time, like design, like it's not a passive process that like that we receive something from outside ourselves. But of course, outside, inside is a bit of not accurate words. But yeah, you get what I mean.
Yep.
Anyway, so the design being transfers itself in some sense within possibilities, inherited possibilities. And then when you talked especially about like Kamala Harris or you voting for them and stuff. So to me, there is a point where in the way you explained, it seems that this is our only possibilities. Mm-hmm. So the dual process where I also have, not I as an I mean, I'm sorry, but anyway, like this dual process of formation and forming something like that that exists prior to me, but I do make changes within it and spontaneously.
I actually, it's worth reading. Klosowski's Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle. We're starting a reading next week. Finally, I know everyone, it might be this week, but it's probably going to be next week. It's probably the best. I would love to answer the question directly, but that reading is literally about, for Klosowski, how Klosowski reads Nietzsche is that the eternal return is actually something that happens a lot more imminently, that the high feeling that he talks about, the sort of self-emancipatory enlightenment moment that Nietzsche talks about when he understands this eternal return, is that he is doing this weird thing. He's able to understand at once that not only is he someone who exists in response to the world, but also someone who is in that next moment oscillating between that and the understanding of the world. And this oscillation happens incredibly fast. And his high tonality of the soul, the enlightenment moment, is understanding this and seeing it from above. The thing that's fascinating is, for Nietzsche, the awareness of this moment, this oscillation, enables us to make slight adjustments, but then forget that we ever did. And we will once again experience it and fall back and go, oh, wait, I'm aware of myself and much more aware of the things around me. And in those moments, you can knock a little bit loose and then forget again. And this is basically the eternity of life, is this vicious circle of becoming aware of the way that you understand the world, and that it is also you understanding the world, and then also forgetting that it's you understanding the world. And it's a really fascinating back and forth that I highly, highly recommend. Highly recommend. It's a really good book.
Yeah, sorry, about that book specifically, you mentioned last time that you have, it's a very long book, but I don't know the English version of it, because the version that we have translated is only 300 pages. And the way you talked about it, I thought that maybe we have a partially.
When I say long, there are books that are 50 pages I consider long books. It's about density for me.
Okay.
And Le Cercle Vicieux is incredibly fucking dense.
Okay. But so when you talked right now about forgetting something, I remember that Nietzsche mentioned in, I think the book would be, it's in English, The Use and Abuse of History. He talks about the sheep. Have you read that paragraph? He talks about when man asks the sheep some question, the sheep just stands before them, fascinated, and moves directly, not because they didn't understand the question, but rather that by the time the question ended, they forgot the question itself. So this is the way animals live, and then that's you understand Deleuze's becoming animal in some sense.
Well, yes. Well, and again, I really just love that connection, because you kind of just did the work for me. Because that's what Deleuze is doing. He, in his book on Nietzsche, and throughout this, he talks about the beauty of forgetting, and that this is Nietzsche's medicine. I think he refers to it at one point, that the healing is the forgetting, even though we may somatically remember response, and that does happen, that the beauty of forgetting is kind of like a huge fucking deal. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Here is Vicious Circle, and then Le Cercle. One sec. Where the fuck is the French? Maybe I know I have it. What the fuck? Oh, I misspelled Klosowski because I'm really stupid. That's depressing to me. Oh, wait, maybe I don't have do I not have a PDF of the French? Maybe I don't. If you speak French, you can find, yes, sir.
Something not related at all, but in your stream, you don't have a link for donations or support. You only, you said something that if someone needs to support you, I don't know, then you said links, but is it just Patreon?
It's if you go to the top of the chat, there's a pinned comment. Support the stream and channel.
Okay, does that takes me to Patreon?
That'll take you to effectively it's a PayPal type thing, but they don't take any money. YouTube takes a solid 20-30% of every dollar I put in.
Feudalism.
Yeah, it's what they do. So the other way is better. Of course, the best is Patreon. And if you're already, dude, you're good. You've given enough. You're solid. Don't worry about it. I appreciate every dollar, because again, I'm trying to eventually want to do this a little bit more full time and not have to stress and live through nightmares. But one sec, I want to get to, we might end up not reading the rest of this paragraph because I've got 15 minutes left and I've got a bunch of shit to do. Because I've got a bunch of stuff to set up, because I am trying to get a Vicious Circle reading going this week. It'll probably end up being next week though. But I want to get to, where the fuck is it? Come on. Sorry, one second. It's in the attempt of, there it is. Experience of the Eternal Return. There it is. We're going to switch over to PDFs now. One second. We're technically not on Anti-Oedipus anymore. Apologies to everyone who's here for Anti-Oedipus. That's just the way it's going to work. So let's go ahead and add in. All right, application capture. It's going to be PDF.
This is just part of the experience.
It is. This is how it goes. There's Klosowski. There we go. And here you go. And really wish I had a single page translation of this. That would be so much better. But for now, I'll move it over when I make my way. We're going to start from middle of 56, and we're just going to read a little bit and talk through it. If one of you guys study mathematics and science learning comprehensive channels out there, 3 Blue 1 Brown is my favorite mathematics channel, and he's got a bunch of other recommendations as well. But 3 Blue 1 Brown is phenomenal. There's a handful that like go into like really, really weird specific stuff, but 3 Blue 1 Brown is like my general. There you go. The thought of the eternal return of the same came to Nietzsche as an abrupt awakening in the midst of Stimmung, a certain tonality of the soul. Initially confused with this Stimmung, it gradually emerged as a thought. Nonetheless, it preserved the character of a revelation, as a sudden unveiling. But what is the function of forgetting in this revelation? More specifically, is not forgetting the source as well as the indispensable condition, not only for the revelation of the eternal return, but also for the sudden transformation of the identity of the person to whom it is revealed. Forgetting thus conceals eternal becoming and the absorption of all identities in being. Klosowski is amazing. This is directly into Deleuze, literally directly into Deleuze. So you can just take a lot of what we're doing there. Does Deleuze view the historical field like Hegel in a teleological manner? No. No, definitely not. Is there not an antinomy implicit in Nietzsche's lived experience between the revealed content and the teaching of this content in the formula, act as though you had to relive your life innumerable times and will to relive it innumerable times, for in one way or another you must recommence and relive it. The imperative... Hey.
Afnan tipped $6.90.
You're very kind.
Trying this new link, smiley face emoji, didn't know about, so I used YouTube, which an act of supporting feudalism.
Thank you very much for, again, Afnan. You don't have to keep doing that, but I do greatly appreciate it. Seriously. The imperative proposition supplements the necessary forgetting by invoking the will to power. The second proposition foresees the necessity concealed in this forgetting. Anamnesis. I'm just going to go full screen now because I don't care. I want to be able to read this. Anamnesis coincides with the revelation of the return. How could the return not bring back forgetfulness? Not only do I learn that I, Nietzsche, have been brought back to the crucial moment in which the eternity of the circle culminates, the moment in which the truth of its necessary return is revealed to me, but at the same time, I learn that I was other than I am now for having forgotten this truth, and thus that I have become another by learning it. Will I change again and once more forget that I will necessarily change during an eternity until I relearn this revelation anew? God. It's so good. It's so good. It's hard for me to even describe how much I love this book. I mean, I've done it at length, but it's so fucking amazing. Nietzsche speaks of the eternal return as the same as the supreme thought and also as the supreme feeling, as the highest feeling. Hence, in an unpublished note contemporaneous with the gay science, he writes, quote, "My doctrine teaches, live in such a way that you must desire to live again. This is your duty. You will live again in any case. He for whom striving procures the highest feeling, let him strive. He for whom repose procures the highest feeling, let him rest. He for whom belonging, following, and obeying procures the highest feeling, let him obey, provided that he becomes aware of what procures the highest feeling, and that he shrinks back from nothing. Eternity depends upon it. Earlier, he had noted the present humanity no longer knows how to wait, as natures endowed with an eternal soul, fit for an eternal becoming and a future amelioration, are able to do. Here, the emphasis is placed less on willing than on desire and necessity, and this desire and this necessity are themselves linked to eternity, whence the reference to the highest feeling, or in Nietzschean terms, to the hohe Stimmung, the high tonality of the soul. It was in such a high tonality of the soul, such a Stimmung, that Nietzsche experienced the moment when the eternal return was revealed to him. How can a tonality of the soul, a Stimmung, become a thought? How can that highest feeling, the höchste Gefühl, namely the eternal return, become the supreme thought? I apologize for my German, and again and again and again and again and again and again and again. To the intensity in what could be called moments of rise and fall. However, it is always the same fluctuation. A wave in the concrete sense we might note in passing the importance of the spectacle of sea waves in Nietzsche's contemplations. But does an interpretation presuppose the search for a signification? Rise and fall, these are designations and nothing else. Is there any signification beyond this observation of a rise and fall? Intensity never has any meaning other than that of being an intensity. In itself, the intensity seems to have no meaning. What is a meaning? How can it be constituted? What is the agent of meaning? The agent of meaning, thus of signification, once again seems to be the intensity, depending on its various fluctuations. If intensity by itself has no meaning other than that of being an intensity, how can it be the agent of signification or be signified as this or that tonality of the soul? We asked above how it could interpret itself. We answered that in its rising and fallings it had to act as a counterweight, but this was nothing more than a simple observation. How then does it acquire a meaning? How is meaning constituted in the intensity? Precisely by turning back on itself, even in a new fluctuation, by turning back on itself, by repeating and, as it were, imitating itself. It becomes a sign. But a sign is, first of all, the trace of a fluctuation of intensity. But if a sign retains its meaning, it is because the degree of intensity coincides with it. It signifies only through a new afflux of intensity, which, in certain manner, joins up with the first trace. But a sign is not only the trace of a fluctuation, it can also mark the absence of intensity. And here, too, a new afflux is necessary, if only to signify this absence. This is desiring production described almost perfectly. Like, it's stunning fucking writing. Goddamn, Klosowski is wild, man. Fucking wild. He's literally just going through desiring production and the pulsing and intensity out and in, and how the intensity that ends up being measured ends up having a response intensity, effectively going after, if only to trace, if only to be aware of it, if only to have an absence. Then signification occurs. This sign is a trace of the fluctuating intensity. If a sign retains its meaning, it's because of degree of it coincides with it. Fuck. It's so good. Sorry. Fucking, I need to stop. It's so good. It's so good. And the translation is excellent. This is Daniel Smith. Daniel Smith knows his shit. Not a lot of flows in here. Intensity of what? Intensity. That's the whole point, Daniel. It's not an intensity of what? It's intensity. Intensity occurs, and then in response, more intensity. But the intensities, basically crystallizing around it, end up developing the signification that then is called the meaning of the intensity. And this repetition that happens over and over, pulsing out and in, desire does. No, this is how we find the meaning within intensities over time. You don't right away. The meanings you have as you understand intensities now, I'm 45. It's been a few years of a lot of this. If we want to say that maybe there's pulses like this at like 60 hertz, you're talking about billions of them since I've been born in lots of different ways in lots of different places. The intensity back and forth, continuing.
You mean that what Deleuze in different interpretation called the dark precursor, or the contractile before Kantian philosophy, before this manifold, before even a priori sensation, right? It's kind of like a receptivity, right? The receptivity and spontaneity. It's the passive synthesis, which he took it from Husserl, which is a lot of Deleuze should read Husserl also.
Well, to just dive, because it's the next sentence, just to be able to answer Daniel fully. I'm just going to start. I'm going to move it over and say, whether we name this afflux attention, will, or memory, whether we name this reflux indifference, relaxation, or forgetting, it is always a question of the same intensity, no different from the moving waves of an incoming tide. You and I, Nietzsche said to them, we are of the same origin, the same race. This flux, this reflux will intermingle, fluctuation within fluctuation, like the figures that rise to the crest of a wave, leaving behind them only foamy froth. Such are the designations through which the intensity signifies itself, and this is what we call thought. But if in natures as apparent, limited, and closed as our own, there still exists something open enough to make Nietzsche invoke the movement of waves, it is because, notwithstanding the sign in which the fluctuation of intensity culminates, the signification, because it exists only through an afflux, can never absolutely disengage itself from the moving chasms it masks. Every signification remains a function of chaos, out of which meaning is generated. It's, again, Klosowski has quickly become my favorite because I think he says things in such a fucking clear way. When we talk about thought, well, I think about a thing. I have a sign. I have an idea of a thing. It's, oh, that's hot. I have an idea. I have a signification of, I'm thinking these. Thought is in response. Thought's a response as well. Thought is a reflux. It is the reflux to the afflux of intensity. It goes back and forth. We go back and forth. We continually go back and forth. And thought is actually evoked. This is true for Deleuze, by the way, as well. Thought, we don't just think, and it's like free from the rest of the world. Some people talk like that. Some people think like that. Good for them. The actual way we think is in response to stimuli. Stimuli happen that causes things to happen in our brains. It causes thought to emerge, but it doesn't just emerge naturally. Babies don't have like cohesive thoughts. Look Who's Talking is not a documentary film. I know I'm dating myself with the reference, but I think it's a fair one. Boss Baby is, there we go for you kids. Boss Baby's not a documentary. We aren't born with these capacities. We learn them over time. We learn them through the afflux and reflux of these intensities, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Is there a distinct definition between afflux and reflux? Yeah, afflux, I mean, it's stimuli response, more or less. And he's being very specific with it. It's everything is the flux and then the afflux. But then there's a weird thing that happens. That's the next bit. Intensity is subject to a moving chaos without beginning or end. Thus, in each person, apparently as their own possession, there moves an intensity, its flux and reflux forming significant or insignificant fluctuations of a thought that in fact belongs to no one, with neither beginning nor end. But if, contrary to this undulating element, each of us forms a closed and apparently delimited whole, it is by virtue of these traces of signifying fluctuations, that is to say, a system of signs, that I will here call the code of everyday signs. As to where our own fluctuations start or stop, so that the signs can permit us to signify, to speak to ourselves and to others, we know nothing, except that there is one sign in this code that always corresponds to either the highest or lowest degree of intensity, namely, the self, the I, the subject of all our propositions. It is thanks to this sign, which nonetheless is nothing but an always variable trace of a fluctuation, that we constitute ourselves as thinking, that a thought as such occurs to us, even though we are never quite sure if it is not others who are thinking and continue to think in us. But it is this other that forms the outside in relation to this inside we believe ourselves to be. Everything is led back to a single discourse, namely to fluctuations of intensity that correspond to the thought of everyone and to no one. The sign of the self in the code of everyday communication, insofar as it corresponds to the strongest or weakest intensity, and establishes a correspondence between our own degrees of presence or absence, the degrees of presence and absence of the outside, thus assures a variable state of coherence both within ourselves and within our surroundings. The thought of no one, this intensity in itself without any determinable beginning or end, finds a necessity in the agent, support, that appropriates it for itself, is assigned a destiny within the vicissitudes of memory, the forgetting of itself or the world. Nothing could be more arbitrary. Once we admit that everything is on a single circuit of intensity, for a designation to be produced, for meaning to be constituted, my will must intervene, but again, this is nothing more than this appropriated intensity. Sorry, I just really like him. And I find it very crisp and just very clever. And this is basically, this is desiring production. I think said better, to be frank. The work that Deleuze and Guattari do with the machinic and organic, with the body without organs, I think is absolutely sacrosanct to this discussion, because that's the whole point for him, actually, for Klosowski as well, is the building of what is the body without organs. I think, again, Klosowski in The Vicious Circle gives a different way of considering it, but they're talking about the same thing, the process through which we find the machinic turned into the singular organic, and somehow within that same process. And it's one of the great, mystifications of philosophy for the last forever. But it's kind of amazing. It's time for my, I've read this part on stream, I think, a dozen times. This is why I was like, I just need to do a fucking reading. The challenge is this book, it lends itself to me just reading literally straight through and not explaining. It's very difficult to go through and go, okay, so where do I break up and where do we have discussions? Because some of this is like fucking wildly smart and no one should ever comment on it almost. I don't know like if that makes sense. That's how it feels. No one should ever comment on it because it's just that fucking good. But with that, that is today's reading. We're going to go back to, one second, let me hide that. Next week, we will get into the task of schizoanalysis, which answers all of the questions from the preceding. We can actually skip most of those. Mostly. Most of these books use words with specific prefixes, abde and in, and suffixes. Understanding these patterns strongly help you digest these books more fluidly. It helps. One of the challenges is most of these books are not English, and so having those patterns go across requires a very, very specifically skilled hand. Again, Daniel Smith, his translations of, for example, The Fold, or Klosowski, as I was just reading, are expert level, like S tier perfect. There is a Fold translation you can buy on Minnesota Press and a few others that is a pile of shit. It's a huge pile of shit. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my Lord. Did you just give me a giant purple rupee? I feel like you gave me a purple rupee. I'm very flattered. I don't know what that translates to, but purple rupee is fucking great. Goddard, how do you read so many Important theoretical material from philosophy to science, which are important for strategic goals while also maintaining survival. Optimization tactics for reading. All right. Oh, you know what? I'll end the stream on this discussion. So I have 2 kids, and I've got to make money, and I've got to keep job stuff going. It sucks. It's not great. What I've found the easily best way, one, and I'm not being sarcastic when I say this, schedule a reading group you lead. This sounds stupid, but I know Ben was in here. Anyone who's got a reading group that they're leading, that people are depending on, you will come back and you will make fucking time to read it and prep. I find the social pressure there helps a great deal. Secondly, with that, and it's kind of a side thing, I find having it on my phone, the book, whatever I'm reading, PDF, we have PDFs of everything. Also, Z Library exists, as does LibGen. Being able to actually have it and have a paragraph up. There's only a handful of PDF readers that keep your spot in that good, where like you reopen it and it reopens right to that page. I use UPDF. Acrobat's okay. There are a few others that are pretty good. UPDF syncs across. So I can actually make notes. I can do voice notes that go to text, and that stuff will appear in my PC when I get home, that kind of thing. I find being able to read a paragraph at a time and think about it. And I often do that all, a stoplight or anything when I'm driving. I'll read a paragraph and then I'll think through it, and I'll spend driving time just thinking. Always helps. Always helps. Read Era on Android is fantastic. Then the last thing is I have a Books reader, Boox. But you don't have to get a Books. Like Kobo works. E-readers that allow you to have notes of any sort. Books I like because it lets me use a pen. I'm very tactical like that. I used to mark up all my books. About 20 years ago, I switched to e-readers with pens. And since then I haven't really sort of turned back. The ability to highlight, make notes, and do that digitally, and then delete those notes when it turns out you're a stupid fuck. That stuff is incredibly important to digesting for me. Highlighting and then going back to those highlights later and having those things come back is, for me, incredibly important to retaining any semblance of an understanding of a text. Everyone's got their own thing. We have people I'm in the QC who've been here from the beginning. Grizzler, thank you for the membership. And Shay, welcome to the quarantine. That's
what happened.
The back and forth that you can have with a book comes in many forms. Some people have systems of incredibly complex 4 or 5 highlighters that they use in order to make notes, and then stickers that go on the side. They have notes in the margins. I use the PDF so I can literally write on top, and it's like the way Books works is you can make a note and it is like a pixel thing, like Acrobat. So it's like a comment. So it doesn't cover up anything. But find something that works for you. There is a lot of really great systems on. One second, I have a book. Let me see if I can find it. I don't have it with me right now. But it's how to take notes. And there's a few that are really fantastic on it. Because again, there's not one simple sort of version of this. Anything you read that's that bullshit. But go through and actually look up, how do you take notes? You can Google it. There's people who like their entire YouTube channel is like dedicated to how to annotate and add notes to things. Take the parts that work for you, throw the parts that don't. But if you're not actively marking something, if you're not going through that, you're not learning these texts. It's not possible. The human brain does not work like that. If you're just reading and going, oh yeah, and then you go to the next thing and the next, you're not reading, one, critically, but two, in a way that will enable you to have real conversations around these things. You'll actually spot when I do this. When I've got text that like I've made notes, you'll be able to tell when I'm actually able to respond, because I generally know and I use specific language from the text. I've gone over it. Other times you'll hear me be much more general with how I speak about it because I haven't made the notes. I haven't set those things up in that way. That stuff is really important. How do you take notes is a huge, huge question. And you got to set yourself up for success. And that's how you do it. I read incredibly fast, but I'm very slow on notes. And that sort of becomes, I don't know if it's good or bad. It's my functioning in it. What's been really weird is teaching my son how to read and how to read critically, because his brain works close to mine. I mean, obviously, but also different enough that it's been a learning experience. So that would be like my long ramble there. UPDF is not free. There are only a handful of, you can pirate it somewhere, I'm sure. Some things are worth paying for. UPDF has a one-time payment. Otherwise I wouldn't have done it. I don't believe in subscription models. Pirate all of that. But if you can, look up Books, Boox, on Craigslist or whatever used thing in whatever country you're in exists. And this is true, by the way, of India, China, like anywhere. Books is a global Asian country, but they have outlets and stores in everywhere. And the secondhand market for Books, I even went over this earlier, is awesome. Like, don't buy new. Don't ever buy new of any of this shit. All the new stuff is very expensive because e-paper is expensive and it's R&D. But the aftermarket, Books has a used store themselves that is like 50% off new, and they guarantee it with the same warranty. If you go, and with that, that means that the used market, the secondary market's competing with that. So you can find, I bought they have a very large format. I should bring it down sometime. It lets me read 2 PDFs at once because it's so fucking wide. It's a 19-inch fucking tablet. I bought it for $300. It's normally $900 because I bought it used, and it's been great for years and years and years. So that would be the thing.
Did you notice this kind of, I don't know, it's part of like me, but like, but did you notice when I started reading Hegel and Kant, right? Like, it's very, really, really hard. And it took me like to highlight like even with colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I started with Deleuze, like it's kind of easy. Like, I don't know about like the logic of sense and different repetition is kind of like there's
it's
things
different.
that
It's a different type of writing that Deleuze does, and I think a lot of his followers on or people like around it, that you tend to find that they have, I think, a more prosaic style of writing versus the Kantian or and I think Spinoza's easy to read, but Spinoza I'd put in the same boat of like, here's a methodological approach. Here are the propositions. Here's the statement. And it's very complex and you're like referring back to things and it's very specific. And Deleuze is doing that, but he's doing it in a way that is more ongoing and continuous, which reads a secondary problem for me. The challenge for Deleuze for me is, I read Kant. I've read Critique of Judgment, Critique of Pure Reason. The setup for both of them, there's a lot more of what you're talking about where it's like referring back and sort of self-contained. But I went back and I tried reading a second time. I didn't get a lot more out of it. I don't know how else to put it. Like, I just didn't get, there wasn't like some underlying thing like, oh, I've understood Kant. Now going back, oh, I see what he's saying here, because his thing is built very much for close engagement, but that setup, Deleuze, I will come back and every one of these readings, you can see it in the reading, but I mean, I've read, counting this being the third reading of Anti-Oedipus that I've done live, I've read it twice and since we started this as well, like on my own time. The shit that I have understood in these readings is insurmountably new, and it becomes this, revisiting and coming back over and over and over. I see that with Deleuze. Serre, for example, fantastic example of this. La Poujade, I think, has done amazing work that's very much the same in that direction. Klosowski, absolutely. But
Eugene Holland.
The way that these things are written is almost to finish and then start again. And that there is no, like, completion is always happening, but there isn't like a teleological structure or transcendent structure within the writing itself, which is kind of fucking wild. And again, I probably could find more in Kant, but again, this is just from my reading of it, that my experience, like, it's not the same revelatory experience. Whereas when we started our second reading of Anti-Oedipus, for example, or when we started reading Logic of Sense, and then I immediately went back and reread it, and it's like, oh fuck, you understand how absolutely insanely more you can grasp from each read through, and it's a lot. Deleuze is complicated in a very different way.
In the science of logic, to the extent I read every section twice. Like every section, you have to I read it twice, right? Like it's kind of like when he talk about Kant, like Kant discovered this problematic, right? And he kind of, the idea of problematic, and he kind of not because he kind of, that uncertainty of problematic or something, but something else, right? These questions forming itself, and why Kant discover, why Deleuze said that Kant discovered the problematic, and it's kind of working through this kind of the pattern, right? Working through this kind of the esoteric Louis Carl, and how Louis Carl fit in this kind of entire book, right? Why Deleuze wrote about Louis Carl, and why kind of because there's a propositions, there's esoteric words that Louis Carl said that are, and probably connected to Clavi-Strauss, which is the idea of signifier and designified, right? And the gap between them, right? Deleuze said some kind of, something that hinted in what we read, right? Is that between the gap between the technocrat and between the totalitarian, right? There is a gap, right? This gap, and he said something odd for me, right? That I still never understand, right? That he said that the technocrat is the friend of the dictator, right? So I have to kind of return to the section to understand why Deleuze said that, and what is the relation between the signifier and the signified, right? And forming these kind of form your understanding, little by little, I guess.
Yeah. Hard for me to. Yeah. Also asked, and Guattari, I'll continue. Guattari asked about Obsidian. Whatever you can do that makes you go, oh, this is interesting. This helps me. This makes me do X, Y, and Z better. Go for it. Just go for it. Go do that thing. Use it. I'm not an Obsidian guy. I tend to have a lot of issues when it comes to. I have my tism, as I joke, forces me to, when I have those systems, to overindulge my desire to have lots of referential moments, which means I go back and I end up rewriting lots of notes, which ends up taking place of actually being useful. Ultimately, I used to have a digital garden built on TiddlyWiki, which is really cool stuff, but it's I overindulged too quickly. It's one of the things I really wished someone would make. Again, AI, however you feel. Man, it'd be useful if we just had a tiny, I don't even care about useful answering system, just a fucking AI that can just create those links automatically for me so I don't have to deal with that shit. But no, they're never going to do anything useful with it. They're just going to destroy the economy. What can I say?
Regarding reading or something, I don't know for you how long you've been reading. It seems that you've been reading for a while, for a long time. For me, since I've been reading for almost 13 years now, and I noticed that actually what made mainly the difference is, so how some people, I personally I don't understand when people say, oh, reading this much is like needs a lot of time or something. Because to me, like if you read 30 pages a day, let's say, then your overall yearly would be like 35 to 40 books, depending on, of course, the sizes of the books. And then if you manage to choose the books quality over quantitative, like if you manage to take like good books to read rather than reading everything, and try to be more precise in your reading. So, for example, if you're interested in Deleuze and Guattari, then you are easily able to read 10 books a year for them. And then that basically year is a Deleuze-Guattari year where you collective a lot. I mean, 10 books, this is minimum. To me, I think, like, I don't know if you understand me, but like I think people are sometimes a little bit, they make big deal of reading, like in the sense that it takes a lot of time, when a 30 pages a day or like 20 or 25 pages a day, it's not that much. And when you make it all of it, as long as you continue doing it. Now, that's, of course, if you're someone who is working, you still have time, an hour a day or 2 hours a day to read. I mean, of course, your mental capabilities. I mean, not capabilities. I mean, like your mental, not capabilities. What was it? Capacity. You know, you get like.
Well, on that though, it's the capacity. Some of the, if I probably were to think of like the biggest thing that helps me retain or make my way through, it's that there's two ways for me personally, and this is not me saying everyone should do this, but there's two ways I digest texts. First is just reading it. I put on headphones. I have my music cranking so that way I can focus. Don't know why I have to, but I do. The second way is actually with multiple books, but they're all secondary sources. So I have AO open with Eugene Holland on top of multiple websites on my phone. And as I'm going, I ask, like, it's okay. I believe it's okay to be asking questions of the internet as you're going, like, what does this mean here? What does this mean here? What is this line? And if you just put a sentence from a book you're reading in quotes in Google, you can find out a lot of people will always, there's so much thought on everything. And reading those opinions and then finding a way to formulate my own, the retention of something becomes infinitely more powerful for me. And it's that back and forth, I think, that works extremely well.
So you said exactly, like, that's the importance. What I meant is, like, once you've read a little, like, for example, you read Deleuze and Guattari 5, 10 books, whatever you've read, you're getting a DNA of a type of thinking. It's not regarding
an image of thought, sure.
Exactly. You're getting a mode of thought. Exactly. An image of thought, what like Deleuze calls. Yes, exactly. So in that sense, when you read, for example, whenever you're reading a new text of Guattari or a new text of Deleuze or a new something about them, it will be easier to digest even more. It will be easier always to keep, like, you wouldn't need to keep taking notes a lot when you read something that is about them or regarding them. Once you already have that link, that image of thought about them. So yeah. So in that sense, I'm the type of person who thinks that reading one philosopher gives you this image of thought about a lot of other philosophers, that once you read them, it will be easier. Like, it's better than reading like Kant than Deleuze. Read Deleuze, then read Kant. And then when you read Kant, it would be much easier to digest the book faster, don't need to take that much of notes, and just you will actually find things that maybe Deleuze overlooked, or maybe like something like that. Like that's to me with how it started. Like, Deleuze was the first philosopher I read. And then if I read Nietzsche before Deleuze, I wouldn't have understood anything. But then, because I read Deleuze, and then when I went back to read others who Deleuze discussed, I found it very much easy to read them.
Fair enough.
So that's why it's better to keep in one philosopher within a time.
I would almost, if I were to modify it, because I do agree completely, it's sticking with something and not allowing yourself to go outside of it, because it's important for retention, because it's important to not try to, as I like to say, your goal is not to put yourself in the philosopher's head. Your goal is to actually read their works. And one of the other things with that, though, that I'll say is having like those ancillary texts from the thinker. As I've been doing AO this last reading, especially, it's stunning to me as I go through and I'm reading like Lapujade's new translation on Deleuze's piece on art, on painting. And then also I'm reading another Deleuze piece and redoing My Logic of Sense, and then Klosowski. But they're based around a lot of the similar thought, and the way that they intersect, to me, really does an extraordinary job of sort of, I don't know, making things sort of land in different ways. My experience, at least. But that's my experience. Let's see, where am I going to send you? Because we got a handful of you fucking people. And let's see what we got. Let's see what we got here. Who is live? Oh, well, this will be nice. You should all. Let me see if I can do it. Let me see if I can make you go there. One sec. We will give this guy one moment to change his settings, because he's right now doesn't. Whenever you say Land, I think of Nick Land. He is doing a good enough job crushing himself. There's like a sadness to his existence for sure. Sorry, I'm fucking with someone. Oh, come on. There. We'll give him a moment. Come on. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to send people that. I'm trying to send him that. It's not working. That's okay. We're going to give it a second. Because Sirius and Envy are doing a Latour reading right now. Which I would love to encourage them to continue doing that. Bruno Latour, who is stunning and wonderful in pretty much everything he writes, is vastly underused, and
he's one of my favorite philosophers of all time. Like,
he's phenomenal.
Yeah. I got obsessed with him for like 3 years. Like for 3 years.
It's easy to happen, that's for sure.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. They're
like
figuring it out.
Please go ahead. Have you read Herman's like
I'm not an guy. Not my thing.
I'm not talking about the thing, the object. I'm talking about Latour. Because like
I have not read his work on Latour. No.
I mean, he does have a book on Latour. Ignore that one. Because that, when he wrote it, it was his first time.
Generally, when someone says Graham Harman, I just ignore Graham Harman. So if you want to recommend, I'd be happy to read something. But
no, I
wouldn't.
Yeah, I would. I don't like him either. I mean, in some sense, I do think he makes philosophy pop philosophy, which I hate a lot. I don't like that type and way of writing and dealing with some ideas. But regardless, I do actually like one thing only about like Latour from Herman's perspective, which is him linking him in some way to Heidegger, and it's a unique connection that isn't easily seen within the work.
Yeah,
and I only think he was able to do that. It's because he wrote Tool Analysis on Tool Analysis. That's
all right.
Yeah.
Real quick, it's done. I'm going to bounce out. That's 2.5 hours. As always, thank you for supporting the stream. Those of you who could, and those of you who do, absolutely. There's a link above. You can always, of course, head to Patreon, patreon.com/DGQC, or join us live, discord.gg/DGQC. I'm going to send you on YouTube. I'm sending you over to Series. Give love to Series. Give love to Envy. And take care. And as always, I'll see you all soon enough.